out of the ground, Yahweh Elohim formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, Stan, Phil, Frank, Selma, that was its name. The man gave names to all cattle and to the birds of the air and every beast of the field. Hey, Ralph, how you doing? Who or what was Lilith? She seems to me to be a sort of folk demon absorbed into the Eden myths from Mesopotamian lore. Well, as I understand it, it went like this. The rabbis, at some point in the ancient world, noticed the problem between Genesis 1 and 2. Wait a minute, doesn't it imply in Genesis 1 that God made at least a male and female together at the same time on the sixth day? But then in chapter 2, he makes the male and then all the animals, and then the female, Eve. Oh boy, how do we square this? And so what they came up with was the notion, well, maybe God did create a woman at the same time as the man, but something happened to her and he had to replace her. And the replacement was Eve. Okay, now what would have happened? Who would this have been? I mean, there's got to be a story there somewhere. And so this is what's called a scholastic myth, where somebody kind of creates a legend or a myth as a way to plug the hole in the thing, like the gap theory, right? Where did dinosaurs enter the picture? Well, the Bible writers didn't know about them, but moderns do, even fundamentalists. So they said, maybe God created the world and put Lucifer, his right-hand man, in charge of it. And there were dinosaurs there. Flintstones meet the Flintstones. However, once Lucifer fell and became Satan, then the world as we knew it was destroyed, and then we started over again. Like, is that hinted at in the Bible? No, but it would come in handy to get us out of a tight spot, a rather extravagant little thing to miss, right? Why didn't the Bible tell us that? Well, let's help it out.
You are dust, and to dust you shall return. Oh boy, is that blood-chilling. God saying, hey, I made you from the dust. I can turn you back into the dust, and in fact, that's what I'm going to do. Nice knowing you. Whoa, that's the end of the Garden of Eden story. Remember, people could have eaten of the tree of life and lived forever, but too late for that. So you're just gonna be dead.
Well, it seems clear to me that Cain was a popular character and was the subject of many different stories set in different historical periods. In one, he is the first human born in an ordinary way of human parents, but in others, he is kind of a hero or a rogue or a villain who appears in different stories set in different times. But I always like to compare it to Prince Valiant, or even worse, Xena Warrior Princess, where in one episode she's talking with her buddy Goliath in the 11th century BCE, but the next week she's with Galen the physician in the 2nd century CE. What the heck is going on? Well, again, they don't really care, because nobody's making a historical documentary here, right? It's just as she lives in the ancient world, let's have her meet all sorts of ancient folks and leave it at that. Same thing with Cain, only you didn't have a team of writers. The Kenites had a distinctive tribal tattoo. And if you ran into one of them, you'd say, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to step on your camel's hoof. Purely a mistake. Oh, is this your table? Oh, that's okay. I'll get up and eat in the corner. Because you saw the mark, the tattoo on their forehead or wherever, and said, you don't want to mess with these guys. And because if you get into a fight and you manage to kill one of them, here comes the vendetta. They're going to retaliate by killing 7 of your people. And that appears to be the origin. Where did this come from? Well, the original Cain, their father, their founder, was a murderer. That's the idea of these ethnological myths. They're like political cartoons. You sum up a particular group in your day by telling stereotype stories about them in the form of their imaginary ancestor. It seems to me that the way the man and the woman are depicted is much like in the Charlie Brown cartoon from decades ago, where Lucy Van Pelt comes up to Charlie Brown, who's watching something on TV, and she says, Charlie Brown, tell me something. I guarantee you I'll believe it, whatever you say. Well, to get rid of her, Charlie says, okay, how about this? The moon is made of cheese. How do you like that? And she says, wow, the moon is made of cheese. She's amazed, and she goes and finds her brother Linus. And she says, guess what, Linus? Charlie Brown told me the moon is made of cheese. Isn't that fantastic? And Linus says, what? The moon's not made of cheese. So she goes back to Charlie Brown, kicks him in the head and says, Charlie Brown, you fool, the moon's not made of cheese. That's kind of the way the man and the woman are. They've just been created, right? They're naive. It's like they're babes in the woods. They're not exactly disobeying God, or it's not some moral conflict. It's not a temptation. They believe the first thing they're told, and they believe the second thing they're told. So I've never heard any good Christian explanation for how they don't yet know good and evil, and yet they have just done evil. It's sort of like when Moses is up there on Sinai getting the commandment not to make an idol. And while he's there, the Israelites are making an idol. And he gets down there and has them all slaughtered and all that. Why? Their whole point was, when's Moses going to get back with those commandments? I'm tired of waiting. Had he shown up a little earlier with the thou shalt make no molten image, this wouldn't have happened, right? How can you blame him? As Paul says, where there's no commandment, no sin can be reckoned. I once knew a guy that said he got converted to Christian faith by reading the book of Numbers. I thought, how on earth? You wonder, what the heck am I doing having to plod through incense recipes and instructions as to whether you're supposed to make the curtains on the Ark of the Covenant out of manatee hide or dugong hide or whatever? What on earth? Good luck having devotions based on that, right? Why are you supposed to be reading it? Well, the answer is simple. You're not. And people begin to wonder, well, am I missing something? Well, yeah, you're missing the fact that you're reading somebody else's mail. You're buttering up God to praising him, to incline him to answer your prayers. There's a little element even of holding him accountable when it says, well, you did all this for our ancestors. Here we are worshiping you. Surely you'd want to do the same for us, right? And it seems that's pretty clear also in the Rig Veda, where you've got a different slate of gods, but the same thing. Oh, Indra, you saved the world. You defeated the dragon Vritra. You did this and that. And we just can't get enough of your mighty deeds. By the way, would you mind answering these prayers for us? These guys saw the Ark and said, oh, let's take a look inside it, just like Renee in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they die as soon as they stick their heads in there. And it says something like, depending on the manuscript you read, something like 77 men died that day, or 7,700 or 1,000, I forget what it is, some gigantic number, but take the lower number. You have to ask yourself, wait a second, how big was this thing? How big was the ring around it of people looking into it? And if it wasn't that big, and I don't think it is, it's not described, right? The measurements are given elsewhere, right? It's not that huge. You got to picture people lining up to look in and die. Right, you see them going up there and keeling over dead, but you got to get your look. So you go in there and kick the corpses aside to take a look, and the same thing happens to you. It's ridiculous. Or Samson, He beats 1,000 men, kills 1,000 men, and his only weapon is a mule's jawbone. 1,000 of them? Now, this guy could have been as strong as Superman, but try to envision the scene. There are 1,000 Philistines, and they can't surround and cover this guy? But how does he kill 1,000 of them this way? Do they line up each to get theirs? You know, wham, next, wham, next, wham, next, through 1,000 of them? The story just doesn't make any sense. The writer didn't think it through. But yeah, I agree. I think the archaeology just really dissolves the whole Old Testament narrative. It's all fiction. It's not history. And I mean, if the David and Solomon things are at all true, what the heck happened to their great buildings and palaces and temples? You got the same question as with the Exodus. Why is there no evidence of this mass population? Will what, God send angels down with vacuum cleaners? By the word of the Lord the heavens were created, and by his Spirit he did something synonymous. Somebody else mentions this. Dale says, not Dale Gribble. Well, maybe it is Dale Gribble. I just listened to your March 22nd show where one of your listeners mentioned the idea that the story of Adam and Eve and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden may be an allegory of Judas being sent from the Jerusalem temple into exile in Babylon. I was intrigued by this idea when I first heard Francesca Stavrakopoulou make the connection between the Garden of Eden and the Jerusalem Temple on a BBC program called The Bible's Buried Secrets, The Real Garden of Eden. I often heard scholars make the case that the garden was considered a sanctuary and that Adam is considered a priest. In Genesis 2:15, he is said to work and take care of it, words used elsewhere to describe the priest's work in the tabernacle. Numbers 3:8. You mentioned that the reference to the Tigris, Hiddekel, and the Euphrates rivers would place it in Iraq, but John Sailhammer has pointed out that since the Gihon is described as flowing around the land of Cush, that the description of Eden fits the boundaries of the promised land, quote, from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates, Genesis 15:18. At least that's what the government would have you believe. So I'd appreciate your insight in trying to figure out what's the deal with the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. I'd like to know. It's the Euthyphro problem from Plato's Euthyphro dialogue. Socrates has been brought up on charges of impiety vis-a-vis the traditional gods of Athens, and he's awaiting trial, and he's hanging out at the courthouse. And here comes the Athenian yuppie Euthyphro, who, as scandalized gossip reports, is on his way there to file charges of impiety, the same crime, against his own father. And Socrates, maybe he knew he was coming. He says, Euthyphro, just the guy I wanted to see. Oh, what is it, Socrates? He says, well, I hear you're bringing up your own father on charges of impiety. Now, as you may know, I'm up on charges the same way. Now, I'm trying to figure out what to say to defend it. I'm not sure what this even means, but I know you must be sure. After all, you're accusing your own father. Could you tell me what exactly impiety means? I'll be happy to, Socrates. The pious thing to do is what the gods love and command, and the impious thing to do, and that is how you pronounce it, by the way, not impious. The impious thing to do is to do what the gods hate or not to do what they love. That seems pretty simple. And Socrates says, "Oh yeah, that's good. But one thing." What about the things that some gods love and others hate? I mean, think of the Trojan War. The gods lined up, some of them on the side of Troy, some of them on the side of Greece. Now, vis-a-vis Apollo, I guess it was impious to be in favor of the Trojans, but vice versa. What about that? And he says, well, I guess you have to just say piety is doing what all the gods love, what they all agree on, and impiety would be disobeying that. The others are in a different category. Oh, that's pretty good. Just one last question, Euthyphro. Do the gods love and command a thing because it's right? Or do we say it's right because they love and command it? I mean, like, for instance, if Zeus decided tomorrow that murder was good and commanded it, would that make it right? If he decided that everybody was morally obliged to walk on their hands, would that make that good, or would we just be in trouble? And Euthyphro's reaction is, gee, look at the time, I gotta run. Good luck, Socrates. Well, yes, you see the problem. Well, Daniel, that's where do you want to start? That seems to have a style, well, not style, but a form of Hebrew too late for the time of the exile, though there I'm totally at secondhand, not knowing Hebrew, but that's what I read, check it out, see if you think that's worth anything. But when you look at the ostensible prophecies toward the end of the book, it's very clear, almost transparent, almost too clear what is being predicted. It matches very closely what we know from Josephus about the movements of the Seleucid armies and the Hasmonean armies and all of that in the middle of the 2nd century BCE. Amazingly close. And this is supposed to be the prophecy, right? But if you go back to the scenes, the narrative scenes set in ostensibly in the time of the Babylonian Empire, before the conquest of the Medes and Persians, there it's filled with anachronisms and errors. There's no such thing as Darius the Mede. Belshazzar was not the successor to Nebuchadnezzar. It was Nabonidus, not Nebuchadnezzar, who supposedly went crazy and lived like an animal in the woods for a year. The astrologers are called Chaldeans, which is an anachronism. That is a reference to Babylonians, an earlier Babylonian culture made by Neo-Babylonians, which is where Daniel is supposedly situated. Daniel mentions, Daniel is supposed to be in the exile, and yet Ezekiel, who was certainly in the exile, mentions Daniel along with Job and Noah as ancient wise men, whereas if the book of Daniel is right, he would have been Ezekiel's younger contemporary. Oh, let's see what else. There are Persian and Greek loan words in Daniel. There's just no way this was written in the time of the exile, so it's late and pseudepigraphical. Paul Tillich said that that makes the notion of an eternal heaven and hell just ridiculous and unreasonable, because nobody is unambiguously righteous or unrighteous. Everybody's got some element of both, and it's not easily calculable. The Dead Sea Scrolls people kind of thought it was. They had horoscopes, and they could tell you what share of the spirit of light and the spirit of darkness a person had. Look to the cookie, as Jerry Seinfeld would say.